I always tell my children that your personality creates your personal reality. And if you want to change something in your life, then on a fundamental level, you have to look at the thoughts you're thinking to see if they're serving. You notice the behaviors and that you're demonstrating and see if those are loving to yourself, and begin to look at the emotions that you've memorized that become part of your identity. And children begin to understand this very naturally, because the law with children that I believed from the time my children were very young is that if you give them the facts, they will interpret the laws. So because of mirror neurons, your children are paying attention to more of what you do than what you say. So you can't say to your kids, clean your room and have a messy room. You understand, because they're gonna look at your room subconsciously automatically. And I was, doing an interview for this book. Someone was interviewing for me for this book and they said, can you tell me about the terrible twos? I said, it's really simple. What do you do the first, year of your child's life? Oh, look how cute he is. Look how cute she is. Look. Oh. And then all of a sudden at 1 year old, what happens? They stand up, right? And they stand up and their brain is so neuroplastic and they go, wow, look at this vase. I wonder how it's made. Oh, it holds water and then it begins. The child begins to interact with the environment out of curiosity, pulling things, breaking things, and then what do? No, you do that for a whole year. And then you say at 2 years old, put your shoes on, and what's the child saying? No, that's mirror neurons, it's only mirroring behavior. So we know then that children pay attention because of those mirror neurons more based on what they observe than what they're told. We've all probably caught ourselves at one time or another doing or saying something, and then realizing I'm starting to act just like my mother, father. I don't know about you, but this realization scared the heck out of me. What are the chances that you will ultimately behave and act just like your parents? This is a legitimate important question. If conscious awareness only activates our genetically pre-patterned neural network of synaptic connections, we probably will think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, and act just like our parents at different points in our life. Those inherited synaptic circuits will become so strongly wired by the repetitive firing that will be naturally predisposed by our genetic propensities to be of the same mind as our mother and father, whether we have inherited the wiring for anger victimization or insecurity from the genetic code of our lineage. Because our parents have remembered, practiced, and mastered those circuits to produce the same repeatable experiences. If these cells continue to fire together, then they will develop stronger and more intricately refined synaptic connections. Our consciousness tends to live in the part of the brain where those familiar circuits hold the reins. People often operate as if they have only one option for behavior. We've all heard folks say, hey, that's just me. That's just who I am, more correctly, given what we know about the role genetics plays. They should say, hey, this is just me choosing to activate the circuits I have inherited from my mother and father because my brain possesses neuroplastic qualities. I've developed some of my own neural nets. But for now, I'm choosing to go with what has been present from the beginning. That's just who I am. After studying this phenomenon, I began to realize that theoretically, if we don't make any new synaptic connections in our life, we can rely only on our inherited synaptic connections. And that leads to mind expressing only our genetic predispositions. How can we add instead to what we are given? How can we add to the trillions of possible combinations, sequences, and patterns of synaptic connections to upgrade the hardware of our brain mathematically based on potential combinations and permutations? If we just add a few synaptic connections to the existing matrix, we will add many new possible directions in which our brain can fire and novel sophisticated sequences and patterns. Our genetic inheritance is not the end all, but only the initial deposit of our neurological capital. In order to evolve ourselves and our species, we must be able to add to and modify what we were initially given. Our ability to express a greater sense of self results from adding our own synaptic connections in response to our environment and utilizing our brain's plasticity. Both play a crucial role in helping us form these connections. I think anybody who is alive right now who is engaged in life has noticed a quickening taking place. In other words, everybody feels like more things are happening in a shorter amount of time. So there's an acceleration, and time is a construct in our mind. There's no circuitry, there's no hardware in our brain to be able to understand time. It's a construct based on our past and how we predict the future. But information is so readily available in our world right now that in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. So you don't need an authority to gain information any longer. You don't need a priest, you don't need a governor, you don't need a doctor, you don't need a teacher. You can access information at your fingertips. So then, as you begin to discern the information with discernment, the proper and right information, you begin to develop some type of empowerment because all of a sudden you're seeing possibilities that you never saw before without that information. So you wake up and you become more aware. So the knowledge creates awareness, awareness creates consciousness, consciousness and energy are connected. So there's a change in energy globally going on with the world now that knowledge and that change of energy has effects on paradigms that are no longer a vibrational match with that new level of consciousness. So you see a political system that's unraveling. You see economic systems unraveling. They're unraveling. They can't sustain themselves with this new energy. You see journalism, the environment, education, religion, medicine. It's all unraveling because something greater has to come as a result of a change in consciousness. Now, no victims here. Because when you and I negotiated from a soul level to be here at this is the time we've been waiting for. This is where it's happening in the Milky Way. This is happening here because there's a true coming of a new consciousness. There's not one person that's coming. It's a collective consciousness that's emerging, and emergence is one mind, one heart, and the way you control people is you give them misinformation based on emotions. You control people by controlling their emotions, and media and television and advertisement is a great seduction that people can watch the news and get really angry, then change the channel and watch a football game and get very excited, and change the channel and watch a sitcom and laugh, and change the channel and watch a drama and you can change your emotional state because of technology. So then it means most people are relying consciously or subconsciously on things outside of them to make them feel a certain way. And so my interest is to provide the proper content of information scientifically to people so that they reason that this is actually possible, then to give them the opportunity to experience that philosophy and get their behaviors to match their intentions as many ways as I can. Now, if I do that properly, people are going to have new experiences. Experiences are going to change the circuitry in their brain. Learning makes connections, but experience enriches connections. The end product of an experience is an emotion. So when you start feeling worthy, when you start feeling a love for yourself, when you start feeling a love for life, when you start feeling truly grateful, the moment you feel that emotion, you're teaching your body to understand what your mind is understood. If we choose to rely solely on our inherited circuits, we develop the habit of being our genetics. What is the alternative? There are two ways we make new synaptic connections in the brain. The first is to learn new things. The second way is to have new experiences. Every time we learn new knowledge or information, the brain changes. When we embrace a novel experience, the brain also records it as a new pattern of neurological circuits. Therefore, if we seldom learn new things and have hardly any novel experiences throughout our lifetime, the fewer the synaptic connections we will make. For the most part, our conscious awareness will be limited to using those initial neural networks from our genetic lineage with which to produce the mind. According to his model, when we fire the same genetically inherited circuits over and over again, then we wire ourselves to live out only our predetermined genetic destiny. Put another way, if we repeat the same familiar, predictable routine and automatic actions, thoughts, habits, and behaviors, our brain will remain at status quo. And if we accept the fire together, wire together theorem, then it will only make sense that those connections will become more hardwired by the repeated activation of the same neural nets. We will not evolve our brain to any large degree. The way out in order to escape our genetic propensities is to continually learn new information and have new experiences. Typically, when we have acquired new knowledge, we say, "I learned something new today." What do we really mean when we say we know or have learned something? Generally, this means that we have been exposed to factual data, have committed that information to memory, and can recall it when necessary or when asked what this means. Neurologically is that we have organized a series of synaptic circuits into a neural network which stores that concept. The mere process of learning a new idea and storing that fact as a memory in the brain leaves a mark of that thought in our living neurological tissue. And wouldn't you agree? Then if you were changing a habit, whether you wanted to lose weight or stop smoking or stop eating chocolate, whatever people do, you're going to have to look at the things that cause you to return back to the same choice, and you're going to review in your mind. Oh my gosh, I know that little devil is going to come up and say, go ahead, start tomorrow. Chocolate's good for you. It's all right. Everybody else is eating it. And you have to become selective about that thought's going to come up, and you have to overcome that thought. Would you agree? Because that thought's going to lead to the same choice, right? So you have to review in your mind who you no longer want to be, and then you're going to have to observe your behaviors. And as you begin to observe your behaviors, you're going to have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional addiction or memory in your body, and your body responds to a new mind. It gets a rush of energy. And when it gets that rush of energy, you're giving it a sampling of the future. You're grabbing the reins of the stallion and you're pulling those reins in. And you're saying, I'm the boss, and the body, the animal, begins to respond to your mind. And then you have to look at the emotions, the feelings that you look forward to. Whether it's guilt or shame or unworthiness has become so familiar, you don't even know that you're feeling that way. It just feels like you, and you have to decide. Then, does this emotion belong in my future? Do I want to bring this into my future? Because as long as I'm living by this emotion, I'm living in my past. So then, as you begin to observe those states of mind and body, you begin to objectify your subjective self, and just like viewing a videotape of yourself playing baseball, playing tennis, dancing a dance, speaking publicly, whatever it is, if you can observe yourself, it means you can self-correct better, wouldn't you agree? So then the process of change then is becoming conscious of your unconscious self. And when you begin to decide every day who you no longer want to be, you are retiring the old self, and the body will crave the emotional payoff just like an addiction. And you have to understand that that's the biological, neurological, chemical, hormonal, physiological, genetic death of the old self. And when you begin to understand that, you can work then in creating a new self, and you can begin to emotionally give your body a taste of the future ahead of the actual event. And as we said last night, the emotional signature is exactly what signals the gene, because the body does not know the difference between the actual experience in your life that creates the emotion and the emotion that you're fabricating by thought alone to the body. It's the same.